Mary Kay Cabot has long been a trusted voice in Cleveland sports, but this time, her credibility is under fire. When she confidently claimed that no Browns players favored Shedeur Sanders, it seemed like the final word. But the reaction was swift and jarring. G. Bush surfaced private messages from actual players expressing frustration and hope that Sanders gets his chance. For fans who followed this team through highs and lows, this contradiction stings, not just for what it says about media trust.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
But for what it may reveal about whose voices really matter in the NFL. What's unfolding in Cleveland isn't just a QB controversy. It's a crisis of communication and control. While coaches and media figures project unity, insider leaks tell a different story. One of players feeling unheard, of a locker room quietly aligning behind a different leader, and of a moment that could reshape the Browns' future if bold choices aren't made soon. G. Bush just cracked open the Browns' carefully polished image, and what spilled out wasn't pretty. After Mary Kay Cabot went public claiming there wasn't a single player in the Browns' locker room favoring Shedeur Sanders over Dillon Gabriel, the narrative seemed wrapped up. Neatly. Definitively. Case closed, right? Wrong. Because then G. Bush dropped the bombshell. Receipts. Actual messages. Direct player texts and DMs confirming that yes, there are players behind the scenes who are not only interested in seeing Shedeur Sanders take the field, but are privately advocating for it. This isn't some vague rumor or anonymous source. This is straight from inside the locker room. And it completely contradicts what Mary Kay reported. So now the Browns don't just have a quarterback dilemma, they have a credibility crisis. Because once G. Bush presented that evidence, it became clear. Someone's not telling the whole truth. Either Mary Kay was fed a sanitized narrative by team insiders trying to maintain a clean front, or she chose to echo a version of reality the organization prefers, even when the truth behind the scenes is messy. Either way, it's a problem. Because what G. Bush revealed isn't just that some players prefer Sanders. It's that the organization is actively trying to bury that sentiment. And when a franchise starts filtering reality to protect optics, that's when trust erodes. Inside the team, in the media, and with the fans. The bigger issue here isn't just about who starts at quarterback. It's about transparency, team dynamics, and whether decisions are actually being made based on performance and development, or based on politics, image, and risk aversion. Let's be honest, the Browns haven't exactly dazzled this season. Gabriel, while competent at times, hasn't lived up to expectations. The offense has been inconsistent. The team's overall performance? Underwhelming. And when things go south like this, players notice. Frustration builds. And that's when people start looking around and wondering, why are we sticking with this? That's where Shedeur Sanders comes in. He hasn't played meaningful NFL minutes yet, but that hasn't stopped curiosity from building. Especially among teammates. Especially as Gabriel continues to struggle. And when you've got a young quarterback sitting on the bench, one who's drawn hype and carries potential, it's only natural for players to start asking questions. The issue isn't whether Sanders deserves to start right now. The issue is why the organization is acting like that's not even a conversation worth having. Because if you're telling the media nobody in this locker room supports Sanders, and meanwhile players are sending messages saying the opposite, then you're not just bending the truth, you're warping it. That's not how you build culture. That's how you lose a locker room. And the Browns are walking a very fine line here. By publicly insisting that Gabriel has unanimous support while privately suppressing differing opinions, they're creating two separate realities. The one they present to the media, and the one the players actually live in. That disconnect is dangerous. When players feel like their voices don't matter, or worse, when they feel like the team is covering up their input to push a specific narrative, they disengage. That's how internal fractures start. That's how culture breaks down. And all of this is happening before the pivotal game against the Ravens, a matchup that could determine not only the direction of the season, but possibly whether Sanders finally sees the field. Because let's be real, if Gabriel stumbles in that game, the pressure is going to spike. from fans, from media, and from inside the locker room. And once that door opens even a little, it's going to be hard to close again. Up to this point, the Browns have taken the ultra-conservative route. They've stuck with Gabriel. They've publicly denied any controversy. They've attempted to manage the media cycle with vague language and forced optimism. But the G. Bush report blew that strategy wide open. Because now, there is a controversy. And everyone knows it. It's not just media versus media anymore. It's Mary Kay's version of the story, no dissent in the locker room, versus literal proof from players that there is support for Shedeur Sanders. Not maybe. Not anonymously reported. Concrete. Verified. In writing. And if the team thinks it can brush that aside, it's going to be a long, loud end to the season. The bigger takeaway here isn't just that some players want Shedeur. It's that the Browns tried to make it disappear. That's what takes this from a football story to a trust story. And once trust starts slipping, everything else goes with it. The team can't afford to keep pretending like the locker room is unanimous. The evidence is out there. The story's already changed. And this begs the next question. What happens if they keep Shedeur on the bench anyway? Let's say Gabriel plays decently against Baltimore. The team wins, or at least stays competitive. The noise calms down for now. But what if he struggles the week after that? What if the team keeps losing, and the offense stays stuck in neutral? Eventually, the pressure won't just come from external voices. It'll come from within. The Browns need to be careful here. If they mishandle this, they risk creating a locker room culture where performance and development take a back seat to politics and PR. And that kind of culture isn't just bad, it's unsustainable. Players want to feel like the best man gets the opportunity, that the team is always trying to win. That development isn't sacrificed in favor of appearances. And when that belief goes out the window, so does morale. The silence from leadership so far isn't helping. If anything, it's making things worse. Because now the story isn't just about Sanders. It's about why the Browns are pretending this support for him doesn't exist. This isn't just a quarterback controversy. This is a test of leadership. It's a test of whether the coaching staff can adapt, whether the front office is willing to pivot, and whether the team values truth over optics. And for Sanders himself, it's a waiting game. He hasn't made demands. He hasn't stirred the pot. But the situation is boiling around him. And if the Browns aren't careful, the whole thing could erupt on live television, under the weight of another frustrating Sunday. The Ravens game isn't just a test of Gabriel. It's a referendum on this entire situation. If he plays well, the team buys time. But if he falters again, the calls for Sanders won't just come from talk shows. They'll come from the inside. From the same players who are already texting G. Bush. That moment might not be weeks away. It might be days. And when it comes, we'll all be watching to see what the Browns do. Let us know in the comments. Do you believe G. Bush's receipts? Should Shedeur Sanders get his shot now? Like this video if you're over the corporate PR spin. Share it with someone still defending the team's silence. And hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. This storm is far from over. So here we are, sitting in the eye of a brewing storm that the Browns clearly didn't think would escape their control. But now it's out. It's all out. They tried to suppress it with confident media statements, scripted PR lines, and old-school damage control. They tried to keep the locker room whispers buried. But one thing NFL teams always forget, the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Not in 2025. Not when players have phones. Not when insiders like G. Bush exist, who clearly aren't interested in playing along with the official storyline. Let's break this down again, because the core issue isn't just about whether Shedeur Sanders should start. It's about how dishonest the messaging has been. Mary Kay Cabot went on the record and claimed, flat out, that no Browns players preferred Shedeur Sanders over Dillon Gabriel. No support. Not a single voice in his corner. The kind of absolute claim that's meant to end a discussion before it begins. But what happens when you make a definitive claim that turns out to be provably false? You don't just get pushback. You lose trust. And G. Bush didn't just push back. He leveled the narrative. He came to the table with DMs, texts, receipts, Private communications from Browns players that said the exact opposite of Mary Kay's statement. They do want Shedeur. They're talking about him. Some of them think he deserved a shot. And that wasn't speculation, it was documentation. That changes everything. Because now we're looking at two completely different realities. The one being pushed through official media channels, and the one the players are living in every day. And here's the thing. The moment your players realize that their input is being ignored or misrepresented publicly, that's when the fractures begin. That's when players stop trusting the system. That's when the season starts to unravel, not because of talent, but because of leadership failure. You can't preach team unity on Sundays and then let the truth be buried Monday through Saturday. Let's talk about the quarterback situation itself. Dillon Gabriel, while talented and promising at times, hasn't delivered consistency. That's just the reality. The Browns are struggling. The offense has failed to ignite. The record reflects it. And when teams are stuck in that kind of rut, players start asking the most natural question in football. What else do we have? That's where Shedeur Sanders enters the conversation. Not because he's guaranteed to be better. Not because he's some miracle solution. But because he's different. Because he represents potential. And when your season is flailing, sometimes potential is the only thing that gets people motivated again. But instead of embracing that conversation, the Browns tried to shut it down completely. No public acknowledgement. No consideration. No room for discussion. Just a clean, polished line. Gabriel is our guy. Sanders is developing. The team is unified. Move along. That might have worked if there weren't actual players contradicting that behind the scenes. And now every time Gabriel throws an incomplete pass, or the Browns go 3 and out, the volume is going to go up. Not just from fans, not just from talking heads, but from inside the locker room. That's the part that can't be walked back. The players who message G. Bush, they're watching now. They're waiting to see if the team acknowledges what they said, or continues pretending none of it exists. And if the organization chooses to ignore them, they're not just rejecting a personnel suggestion. They're rejecting the idea that player input even matters. That's a dangerous precedent, especially when the pressure isn't going anywhere. The upcoming game against the Ravens could be a turning point, because if Gabriel struggles under the spotlight again, and the Browns lose badly, how long can they keep saying that everything's fine? How long can they keep pushing the narrative that no one wants Sanders to take a field? Because after G. Bush's receipts, we know that's not true. Let's be clear, this isn't just about G. Bush versus Mary Kay. This is about narrative control. This is about who gets to tell the story. And for years, the Browns have relied on certain voices in the media to help manage that story, to shape public perception in a way that supports whatever direction the organization wants to go. But this time, the organization's preferred version of reality crashed headfirst into a wall of actual evidence. And now they're cornered. Because the longer they deny what's happening behind the scenes, the worse it looks. The longer they pretend Gabriel is unquestionably the guy, the more it looks like they're afraid of what Shedeur might do with a chance. And if that's the case, then this whole development excuse, it starts to feel a lot more like politics than football. Why hasn't Shedeur had a single opportunity? Not one drive. Not one garbage time series. Not one preseason adjacent look during a blowout. That's not development. That's avoidance. And if players are sensing that, if they're watching a guy they believe in get shut out, not because he's failing, but because the coaching staff doesn't want to open that door, then the issue becomes cultural, not tactical. This is the kind of situation that defines organizations. Not because of what happens on the field, but because of how the team handles internal disagreement. And right now, the Browns are flunking that test. Because when players feel silenced, when they feel like the truth is being rewritten for public relations, that's when they start checking out. And if Shedeur never gets a chance, even if Gabriel continues to struggle, then it sends a very clear message that decisions in this building are based on optics, not opportunity. What does that say to the rest of the roster? What does it say to the veterans who are trying to win now? What does it say to the younger guys who are busting it in practice, hoping for one chance? It says, Doesn't matter. The plan is already made. And that's the exact mindset that turns a season from disappointing to destructive. The Browns don't need to name Shedeur the starter tomorrow. No one's asking for a complete overhaul overnight. But to act like the conversation itself is invalid, to deny that players are even curious about what he might bring, that's the mistake. Because if they'd just acknowledged the growing sentiment earlier, if they'd allowed the conversation to breathe, we wouldn't be here. Instead, they tried to control the narrative. And now the narrative is controlling them. And this is only the beginning. Because what happens if Shedeur does eventually get a shot and looks good, even decent? What happens then? Suddenly, all those quiet supporters become louder. Suddenly, the players who were texting G. Bush feel vindicated. Suddenly, the public is asking, why did it take so long? And that's a question the Browns won't be able to answer without admitting what we already know. They tried to keep the truth buried. But now it's out. And here's the real kicker. The Browns didn't have to let it get this far. This whole saga could have been handled with a bit of honesty, a sprinkle of transparency, and a shred of respect for the intelligence of both fans and players. Instead, they tried to steamroll the narrative into something clean and simple. Dillon Gabriel is our guy, Shedeur Sanders isn't ready, and the locker room? Fully aligned. No questions asked. Except now, there are nothing but questions. The moment G. Bush came forward with actual proof, real messages from Browns players expressing support for Shedeur, that neat little narrative went up in flames. And the longer the Browns try to pretend nothing's wrong, the more they look like they're hiding something. It's a tale as old as professional sports. Silence isn't strategy. It's surrender. And the Browns' refusal to acknowledge internal dissent only adds fuel to the fire. Let's not forget what started all this. Mary Kay Cabot, one of the most connected voices in Cleveland sports media, telling the public that not one player supported Shedeur Sanders. That's not just a take. That's a statement of fact. A line drawn in the sand. And when you go that far, you better be damn sure your sources are rock solid. Spoiler, they weren't. Because the DMs and texts G. Bush revealed don't just poke holes in that claim. They demolish it. And it doesn't matter if those players were speaking off the record or in private. The sentiment is clear. Some guys in that locker room want to see what Shedeur can do. Period. You can't erase that with a press conference. You can't wish it away with buzzwords like developmental plan or we trust our process. At this point, it's not about Gabriel versus Sanders. It's about truth versus spin. And if the Browns continue down this road, choosing spin over substance, they're going to lose more than a few games. They're going to lose the trust of their own roster. Because once players see that their voices aren't being reflected in the public messaging, they stop speaking up. They stop caring. And that's when team culture starts to rot from the inside. G. Bush didn't create this controversy. He just exposed it. The cracks were already there. And anyone paying attention could feel them widening. Now, let's talk about Shedeur himself. The guy at the center of the storm. What's wild is that this entire firestorm is happening without him even playing a snap. Think about that. He hasn't thrown a touchdown. He hasn't led a drive. He hasn't been given a real chance. And yet, this much noise surrounds him. That tells you everything you need to know about how much pressure is building inside that building. Because when a player with no NFL reps is already becoming a rallying point for player dissatisfaction, that's not just about talent, it's about belief, hope, the idea that maybe, just maybe, there's a spark sitting on that bench. And that's something Gabriel, fair or not, hasn't inspired lately. The team's record isn't good. The offense looks flat. And every week that goes by without improvement just magnifies the curiosity about Shedeur. Every third down miss, every red zone stall, it all becomes part of the same question. Why not try something else? Yet the Browns continue to shut that question down. Or worse, pretend it doesn't even exist. That's what's infuriating fans. That's what's fueling the online debates. Not that Shedeur isn't starting, but that the team is acting like even asking the question is some kind of betrayal. And meanwhile, G. Bush is out here doing the job the organization refuses to do, telling the truth. Or, at the very least, acknowledging that there is another side to this story. A side that includes players. You know, the people who actually have to play under this decision-making. It's wild how often organizations forget that. Now, the upcoming Ravens game is shaping up to be the breaking point. The pressure on Gabriel to perform is off the charts. If he plays well, maybe things cool down temporarily. But if he stumbles, if the Browns fall behind early, if the offense looks flat again, you better believe the noise is going to become unavoidable. The fans will be chanting for Shedeur. The analysts will be breaking down every Gabriel overthrow. And inside that locker room, the players who already believe Shedeur deserves a look, they'll be watching with crossed arms and quiet judgment. At that point, it's not even about preference anymore. It's about credibility. How long can you preach competition and merit while refusing to give a backup with growing support even a single chance? It sends the worst possible message, that decisions aren't being made based on performance or locker room dynamics, but on fear, on control, on not wanting to admit that maybe, just maybe, the staff backed the wrong guy. But what they don't seem to realize is that doubling down on that decision is making it worse. If Shedeur doesn't get a chance and Gabriel keeps underperforming, this won't just be a controversy. It'll be an indictment of leadership. And honestly, it's already starting to look like that. Because the G. Bush leak wasn't just a gotcha moment. It was a turning point. It was the moment where the Browns lost control of the story, where the team's grip on the narrative slipped right through their fingers. And the worst part? They're still acting like nothing happened. No acknowledgement. No correction. Just business as usual. That's not strength. That's denial. The Browns need to realize this isn't going away. You don't fix this by pretending everything is fine. You fix this by addressing it, by being honest, by saying, hey, we hear the players. We know there's support for Shedeur. We're evaluating every option. Even that small gesture would go a long way. But right now, the silence is louder than anything else. And the more they ignore it, the more it looks like they're scared of what Shedeur might do with the opportunity. Because what if he is good? What if he comes in and immediately shifts the energy of the team? What if he connects with players in a way Gabriel hasn't? Then what? Then the coaching staff has to admit they got it wrong. And that's a level of accountability most franchises aren't ready for. But guess what? That's the job. You don't get to manage an NFL team without owning your decisions, especially when your players are already telling you they're ready for something different. Let us know what you think. Should Shedeur finally get a shot? Do you believe the locker room support is real? Are the Browns making a mistake by ignoring it? Drop your thoughts below, hit the like button if you're tired of the cover-ups, share this with someone still clinging to the official narrative, and make sure to subscribe, because the next chapter of this QB drama is coming fast, and it's going to be loud.